turn it over to our next guest, who's a man I admire because he is not afraid to take a position and hold it strong, including a great column he's got up, his most recent column about the Flyers, where he writes, Paul Holmgren's departure from the Flyers doesn't mean what you think it means. That's my man, Mike Sielski from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Mike, how are you on this Saturday? Welcome to the Pete Thompson Show.
Thanks for having me, Pete. Can we turn the Supertramp back on? I love that album.
Yeah, me too. The Logical Song, Breakfast in America, and what's the rain? The one with the rainy. It's raining again, right? It's
raining again. Yeah. I don't know if that one's on there. Their best album is actually Even in the Quietest Moments, which was I discovered in college and was one of my favorites.
Sounds like you and I should try to sneak out to ELO tonight if we're both in that, genre.
Now you're speaking my language. Jeff Lynne is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
No doubt. So, hey, man, I read this column with great interest because, first of all, when did you take over as the columnist at the Inquirer, and how quickly did your quote-unquote relationship with the Flyers turn sour?
Let's see. My first day at the Inquirer was September 1st, 2013, and within a week of that, I was writing about the Flyers and generating some responses for the things I was writing. Let's put it that way.
Was that first column the one? I thought the one that got the most response was where you had intimated like that Mr. Snyder was like Al Davis. The game had passed him by.
Yeah, they. Like I said, I got hired in the late summer of 2013, and a week later they fired Peter Laviolette and hired Craig Berube. And it was at that press conference where Ed Snyder and I, went back and forth, and I ended up writing a column basically saying that the Flyers need to rethink how they've been doing things. And, I think they were for a while there with Ron Hextall as the general manager. And while I like Chuck Fletcher and think he's a smart guy, and pardon me, I'm curious to see what they do moving forward. I'm reserving my optimism until I see a little bit more, because it's like I wrote the other day, it's becoming pretty clear that they want to get back to the way they used to do things, and the way they used to do things has led to 44 years without a Stanley Cup.
That's right. Now you talk about the strategies they'd used before, trading for the exclusive right to negotiate with a free agent. That was Kevin Hayes, and then they gave him a lot of money, or trading draft picks for veterans, and those are warning signs to you, or red flags for you.
Yeah, they are. I mean, insofar as everybody knows that they want to get better immediately. Dave Scott, their chairman and governor, is not even denying that he feels like it's time for them to stop the rebuild and start improving immediately. And while I understand that sensibility and I understand that feeling, the fact is that they went 9 or 10 years completely hollowing out their farm system and organization. And it's only really been 4 or 5 years that they were trying to replenish the talent in their system and rebuild themselves. So that math to me doesn't compute. I know everybody lauds their farm system and says, well, they have all this talent in there now. 10 years is a long time to go where you only produce 3 impact players for your organization. And that's what they did. They had Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier, and Shane Gostisbehere, and that's it, because they kept either missing on draft picks or trading them away. And it does take a long time to recover from a stretch like that. And my fear, if I were a Flyers fan, would be that they're starting the go for it mentality too early. I understand in the NHL that you can catch lightning in a bottle. We just saw Berube and the St. Louis Blues do that. But if you want to build an organization that sustains success over time, you've got to have that pipeline of talent. And I'm curious to see if they actually continue feeding that pipeline, or whether they start dipping into it to try to get better right now.
When Ron Hextall was dismissed, was that something that took you by surprise, or had you seen sort of hints or signs that was something that might happen?
No, it did take me by surprise, only because he had been so clear about what he wanted to do and what he felt was necessary to get the franchise back to where everybody wanted it to be, and they seemed okay with that. And yet, apparently, within the organization, Hextall was not working and playing well with others, according to the others. And the product on the ice clearly was not what they hoped it would be, but I would have argued, well, they're rebuilding. They may be doing it kind of halfway, where they're trying to be competitive and not tearing the whole thing down and building the whole thing back up. but everybody seemed outwardly to be okay with what was happening right up until the moment that they announced that Ron Hextall was no longer the general manager. So, I mean, I had not everything Hextall did was perfect. He made mistakes along the way, but overall, in general, I thought he was taking the right approach, and it did surprise me that they kind of got tired of it. It surprised me in the moment, I should say, but the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, oh, well, no, this is kind of what the Flyers do, and here we go again.
And how often, Mike Sielski's our guest, columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, read his work at Inquirer.com. How often does the outgoing GM or the terminated GM hold a press conference himself? That was. Did you go to that conference? That was weird, right?
Yeah, I watched it online. I couldn't get to it. It was, I believe, it was in a hotel, literally like across the street from their headquarters in Voorhees, and that is a little odd. And I do think that Hextall, he probably felt like, hey, I was fairly secretive as the general manager. He didn't talk very much. He didn't, open himself up all that much. And I'm sure he felt like, hey, I want an opportunity to explain exactly what I was doing and why I was doing it. And, I think the reaction was to look at him. The easy way to look at his tenure was to say, well, he was a Flyer, and, why would they get rid of a guy who was a longtime Flyer, one of the best goalies in their history, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is that his years in Los Angeles with the Kings really had informed the way he wanted to build the Flyers. And the Kings had gone 6 years without making the playoffs, and that had led to 2 Stanley Cups in 3 years and a trip to the Western Conference Finals and, with a team that could have won the Stanley Cup. And it took a long time and was very painful. And I think Hextall felt like, the same thing has to happen here with the Flyers, and I'm going to be the guy to shepherd them through this really tough time. And he was, really disappointed that he didn't get to finish the job.
And you write about the fact that even though Holmgren is moving on to like a senior advisor position, there's other guys that are still around too. Bob Clark advising Fletcher, or Bill Barber advising Dave Scott, and Holmgren's not going away. He's just moving into a different role. Like it's changed, but it hasn't really changed.
Yeah, I'm sure people saw Paul Holmgren stepping down as team president and maybe thought, wow, they're going to go in a new direction. Well, no. Part of the reason that Paul Holmgren stepped down was that he felt comfortable now with the way things were going within the last year to step down. He'd approached Scott about stepping down, he said, in June of 2018, and Scott kind of talked him out of it. And then, of course, the team got off to a pretty bad start, and they fire Hextall, and eventually they fired Dave Hextall, and then they bring up Carter Hart, and everything turns around, and Chuck Fletcher goes and signs Kevin Hayes and makes a couple trades for veteran defensemen, and it was almost as if Paul Holmgren looked around and said, okay, now we're doing the things that the Flyers usually do to get better in the here and now, so now it's time for me to step away. He didn't step away so that they could do things differently. He stepped away because they were back to doing the things the way they had always done them.
We'll pivot away from Mike Sielski with us from the Flyers and talk a little Sixers, because a week ago at this time, Mike, that was the gift for me. In the middle of the night, Kawhi Leonard decides to take his talents to the Clippers, Los Angeles, but not the Lakers. He goes to the Clippers, and then that means, there's really no excuses for the Sixers now, right? The East is more wide open than ever before. No LeBron, no Kawhi.
Yeah, the East is wide open. The team is different, with Al Horford here, with Josh Richardson, with Tobias Harris here for the long term. It's going to be an incredibly interesting season, I think, especially because, to me, the two biggest question marks are guys who are already here, and in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. And I don't mean question marks in the sense of like, what are you going to get out of them? Because everybody knows what they can do, have done so far and can do, and how talented they are. But I think the question marks are, with respect to Embiid, what kind of shape does he come back in? How much does having Horford and Kyle O'Quinn and these other big guys allow him to rest during the regular season and, have the Sixers enter the playoffs with Embiid in tip-top shape? And then Simmons, the question that everybody asks and should ask, can he shoot? Will he shoot? Tobias Harris made a passing reference to it yesterday that Simmons' jump shot looked great, and that's all fine and good, but if he doesn't take them and make them during games in the regular season and the playoffs, all this hope, doesn't mean very much.
Mike Sielski with us here on the Pete Thompson Show on 97.3 ESPN. Well, I can't let you go without asking you about the July 4th column. I mean, I loved it. First of all, I mean, you're not shy, right? It's titled, "It's Time for Philly Sports and Food Fans to Say No to Wawa Hoagies." What is your problem with the Wawa Hoagie?
Well, first of all, let me say, Pete, that this column got more readers and more response than anything I've written in a year, and that flabbergasted me. I mean, I knew I'd get feedback. I didn't think I'd get as much feedback and response as this column has got. Basically, what I was trying to say, and I think I said it in the column, was that, Wawa is perfectly fine, in a lot of respects. But for a long time now, I have not understood why the Philadelphia area, which is the greatest sandwich area in the United States, regards the Wawa hoagie as kind of the touchstone of hoagies when, first of all, they're not as good as they used to be. Everybody acknowledges that. They used to cut the lunch meat fresh. They don't do that anymore. And secondly, you have so many smaller, family-owned sandwich shops and delis in the region, whether you're talking about the city itself, whether you're talking about down in South Jersey near the shore, Delaware County, Bucks County, Montgomery County, everywhere. You can get a great hoagie just about anywhere, and yet we've elevated the Wawa hoagie into something like royalty, and I don't get it. I really don't. And so I thought, the tailgating season, I had been to a baseball game and tailgated there, and friends of mine had brought Wawa hoagies, and I made fun of them a little bit by saying I died a little inside when they brought them out to the tailgate. And Wawa had just had this big marketing event in Center City near Independence Mall where they'd given out free shorties, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to try to write this. And it's July 4th. It's a slower week. Let's try something different. And it was different, all right.
And your colleague, Craig LeBon, he jumped right on board and said, "You're speaking the truth. Sing it, Mike," he said.
Yeah, well, it's been funny. I've gotten a lot of people who have said, "Thank you for writing this. You're saying what people have thought but not said for a long, long time." And then I got some other people who had some really, really strong negative reactions to what I thought about Wawa. I think they felt like I was kind of being disloyal to Philadelphia or something, which I don't quite understand. Like, I felt like I was standing up for, as I said, these smaller blue-collar, sandwich shops and delis where people are really trying to, working hard every day and coming home every day smelling like provolone cheese and onions, trying to earn a living. And I worked in a couple of those delis when I was in high school and college. I was a short-order cook to make pocket change and beer money and really have an appreciation for those kind of places. So that was kind of where my thoughts on this whole thing were coming out of.
Well, you can rest easy, Mike, because Philadelphia may be going the Wawa way, but South Jersey still has its pockets, especially down here in Atlantic County and Atlantic City. There's two or three huge behemoth names. I won't throw them all out, just that way I don't pick a favorite child and get myself in trouble. But there are mom and pop shops down here. And I'll say this, I will agree with you. I forgot that they used to slice the meat. They'd pull it off because they had like a deli counter and they'd cut that fresh. But also, I know they replaced the rolls, and they thought they were doing a good job by creating they're going to make their own bread. And to me, there's a certain roll out there, starts with an A, that was always my favorite roll. So, hey, I guess we all have our opinion. But, yeah, that's great. Your job as a columnist is to what? Get a reaction, right? Favorable or negative, just get a reaction and provoke, and you certainly did that.
Yeah, and one thing I want to make clear, Pete, is that I didn't write this not believing it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't write it just to write it, and I'll go in later today and buy myself a Wawa hoagie, and I don't actually believe what I wrote. I do believe it. I felt this way for a while. And yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the job is to be thought provoking and to get people, riled up if you can.
Did anybody from Wawa reach out to you?
Actually, they did. The irony is, about 15, 20 years ago, I lived in a house. I rented a house in Doylestown with my best friend, and our landlord at the time was an executive for Wawa, and he is now in a semi-retired position. And 15 years after I lived in his house, he sent me an email the other day to say, "Hey, I read your column, and it's been a while since we talked, but I just wanted to let you know it sparked some discussion and soul searching inside Wawa, and they invited me to come visit their headquarters and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm going to do that yet, but if you see any changes coming to Wawa, you know who to thank for them." Just look right here.
That's right, Mike Sielski. Hey, I thank you for getting up early and coming on my show. They gave me a show, Mike Sielski. Can you believe it? What's Mike Gill thinking?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Saturday mornings, though, it's a nice time to wake up and get the weekend started. And we appreciate you coming on, buddy, and we'll stay in touch.